Okay, full house, exciting. I hope to entertain you and mostly speak from the perspective of a creator who has been immersed in what I'd like to call the snowball phenomenon of working on a production and having the opportunity of collaborating with all kinds of tool makers throughout the whole process of my pipeline. And from the perspective of a creator, almost daydream on different types of connections that could be possible in the world of creation. So I'd like to start by thanking the Korean Foundation for International Cultural Exchange, as well as the National Museum of Modern and Contemporary Art, and of course to thank the National Film Board of Canada for the opportunity of my latest film. It's going to be fun. We're going to try to tackle a lot of situations around film in the world of AI. I personally come from my creative origin is medical illustration, and essentially I really was trained with synthetic imagery at the core of my art. This means really line work that goes to the visual, straight to the visual point. You know, this is an example of some of the work I've been doing really early on, really the line work. And one of the big issues I had from the beginning is when you have abstract types of images that are sometimes need to be read by a viewer for the first time, color becomes a very valuable tool. And I've never really been too good with color. It's always been very unknown to me to fill in the blanks. And that's really where essentially the need to fill in with consensus led to genomic animation. It's really data sets that are regurgitated, right? So AI is stats, it's statistics. And again, in the urban planning of my medical illustrations, I started injecting it with colorful visuals that are essentially regurgitating the database, right? So they're basically taking the genome of all the images of a specific topic and regurgitating them within the urban planning of that cartoon, of that synthetic image. And those are examples here of how that works, right? So this is many examples. It's a lot of them are manual collages, they're digital collages, but that essential need from the perspective of the creator was to have a consensus with your audience and to extend your hand to the audience so that you can both be clear about what is it that's actually being shown on the screen. And this leads, trickle down to one of the films that I made here, the Walking Bread, the Bread Will Walk film. This shows you the pipeline. We really start with traditional 2D animation, and then with the help of in-house software, I started, working with AI on some levels, more of an experiment. For example, here depth-aware interpolation, right? So the motion flow smoothens it, and here some very early on in-house attempts to use diffusion models to really carve out some of the volumes. And here you see some traditional compositing brings in the cartoon with the genomic intervention into a cohesive art form. This is another visualization of the same thing. I really like a woodcut. If I go back to that just for a second, you can really see what you have here is the same image with all the textures from the prompts being layered. And Bread Will Walk was really this snowball effect really start paying off when you start having these icons, these characters, this Canadian character that it roams in the database, in the matrix of many reiterations of itself, following the urban planning of that original design in the line work, and then carved out in volumes with the help of the genomes of images. It's also interesting to mention that we actually ended up not using any of the AI in the final product that ended up in the festival circuit because the real thing looked better to us, and we ended up using digital collage manually. But the experiments were still there, and a lot of the sample of the study cases allowed for that to happen. I really see the technique as a thought form in itself, and I do think that often you end up learning about the potentials of different tools I use, and notably haptics, which was, I'm going to go back to that. The haptic robotics was one of the big discoveries for me. But essentially, the process itself of our film became almost like a product in itself, or maybe not a product, not the best word, but it had its own independent value, and it became its own living being. You know, all this documentation of the pipeline and the reiterations and the rapid prototyping really became essential to understand the creative process. And this is where my discovery of the Innovation Lab here at the Film Board became quite exciting, because there's also a place. This moment in time comes with its laboratory, and I think there's a lot of opportunities when it comes to working on the different versions of a film and reinventing what storytelling means with the help of that making of awareness in the creative act. So a lot of research can be done here. Those are some of my personal excitements when it comes to my personal visual. I imagine what a laboratory can look like. Those are all question marks, and there's really something about creative laboratories and the volatility of a space like that leads to an awareness of your own act, and it can reinform. It can inform your reinventing what it means to do animation. And this goes to, again, beyond the frame. When it comes to traditional animation and animation itself and storytelling, there's a lot of ways to expand beyond that. To me, it's really people. I think that people are at the core of a lot of that exchange in the interstice between the frames. And for this reason, when I'm thinking of beyond what we're seeing so far, I really don't think it will be just a technocratic event. I think it's going to be a social change in the general sense of filmmaking, and how much creative complicity you can have with your audience. That's why I blend it often with social media and again the cultural translation in practice. And again, I think that's where the relevance becomes prevalent with being here right now amongst our panelists, because the language is really at the core of a lot of the prompt engineers, and also cultural context when it comes to these prompts, right? So there's so much leeway, there's so much unchecked biases when it comes to the actual tools and the way language is represented and assumed through these data sets, that I think one of the big conversations that we're about to have probably in the next years from the artist standpoint is exactly cultural significance and cultural exchange within prompt engineering and so on. So thanks for having me, and looking forward to the conversation. So that's a 7-minute.